Hello and welcome to the sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Open Series in Kansas City. I'm Nick Miller alongside Kent Ketter, number 8 on the leaderboard. How you doing?
Good.
You made the 10-hour trek from Indiana.
Yep.
So
interesting.
And for a good cause. You're 2-0 right now.
Yep.
Playing the green-black devotion deck.
Yes.
Now this is a spin-off of the deck Todd Anderson played last week.
Yep.
And you have switched it up a bit. You've added black, and you've cut the Nissas for the Eidolon package.
Yes.
Now go ahead and discuss your changes. You said you played with Todd's version a little bit, and how you came to this conclusion.
So the timeline with this deck starts actually in last season's Standard when I played. There was the green-black deck that Jerry Thompson, the devotion deck that Jerry Thompson had championed. I changed that into a red-green version, Hammer Elves with Hammer of Porphyros. And then the new set happened, and I realized that being hasty wasn't as good as just courting for things. I saw Todd's version. I had tested it. It seemed reasonable. I felt like, though, with the rise in mono black, I really wanted to add some cards to the mix to give me a better mono black matchup.
Right.
I really like the interaction between Farika, God of Affliction, and Eidolon of Blossoms, especially against mono black. In my last round, I played a mono black opponent. He thought seized me, took a card, killed my first Eidolon of Blossoms, and then my second one with Farika, I just started drawing cards every turn. Also, I have access to, so that's the main card advantage engine in the deck.
And that card advantage unit generates basically more card advantage than most decks can even do. Even the Sphinx's Revelation decks have a hard time keeping up with that.
Yep. And then my other chord targets, we have Nylea. It's mandatory for any green deck. You're going to play Nylea. It actually lets you win the game. And then I'm running two spicier cards, Hornet Queen, which I know a lot of other green devotion decks have had access to, but I can't say enough about her. We actually looked, when I say we, I built a deck with Andrew Tenjum.
Who you played in round 1.
Absolutely. And we both felt like Hornet Queen was good enough to warrant maybe a second slot, but we stuck with the one main deck. We decided to go with the Nylea's Disciple. It felt like with Burn, green-white, and some various aggressive decks, also mono-blue sometimes, Nylea's Disciple just gives you that extra 2 turns, and for you, your turns, the later they go, are typically better than your opponent's.
Right.
So it actually felt like the life gain off of Nylea's Disciple was super relevant. I preferred it over Scavenging Ooze, because courting for Scavenging Ooze in like the Burn matchup, not that impactful, but courting for Nylea's Disciple with 6 or 7 devotion usually wraps up the game pretty quickly from there.
It's pretty interesting seeing the slots players choose to use for their chord targets, because a lot of people, were fluctuating between like Reclamation Sage and a bunch of other utility cards, and I think the end result was a lot of people said fewer targets, but more impactful ones.
High impact ones. The other thing was with Reclamation Sage, while I understood what it did, it didn't actually matter in the format. Against mono black, blowing up Underworld connections, whatever, you try to kill them, you don't mess with their connections. In the mirror, the cards that actually matter are Hornet Queen, Pelucranos, and Nylea. None of those are affected by Reclamation Sage. So we came to the reasoning that we didn't want to run 4 chords. We felt 3 was enough. And then we wanted to run just the most efficient, high impact targets possible.
Right. Then you have your Courser, all your Mana Dude package.
The full 12 Accelerants, 4 Elvish Mystic, 4 Voyaging Satyr, 4 Sylvan Caryatid, 4 Burning Tree Emissaries. It's my favorite.
So generating a ton of mana.
Absolutely.
Now the fun part about this deck with the Black Splash is the sideboard options you get to combat some of the decks that gave this deck trouble, or the mono green version. Firstly, you've got some removal spells and Ultimate Price. Golgari Charm there. Blanking, Supreme Verdict.
Absolutely.
Amongst not needing Reclamation Sage when you have things that can also double as other spells.
Absolutely. Golgari Charm's also interesting because Domestication's on the rise out of Mono Blue, so it becomes good enough against them where you can hit both their Master Waves and their Domestications. And many times if they tap out for Domestication and you just charm it, they're too far behind on tempo at that point. They've lost out on 2 devotion, they've lost out on a turn. This feels like a card that can really drag you back into that matchup. Or just blow them out completely.
Also for mono blue, 3 Mistcutter Hydras, my favorite.
Mistcutter is also nice. Obviously against mono blue and the blue-white decks, it's fantastic. But it also gives us the ability to just fireball opponents. And there are certain mid-range matchups where you just need to keep hitting them with threats. Mistcutter Hydras does that perfectly. It's the most efficient threat for its cost. Every many mana you get that size, throw in an Ilea, let's trample, game's over. Sounds great.
We didn't pull one out, but did you have Genesis Hydra?
I do not
have.
So
this guy is like your Genesis Hydra, basically.
That's all I got. That is all I got. I understood the reasoning behind Genesis Hydra, but it felt like one of those cards that if you were being disrupted on the mana side of things, your Genesis Hydras were maybe touching like 3 to 4, and that's frankly not good enough in my opinion. But Ketter Hydra obviously does completely different things, but it feels like a card that if I cast it for 3 or even 4 against the mono blue decks, it seems to get a lot of work done.
Another thing going along with your Polukranos, your Cord, your Nylea, to just dump your mana into.
Yes, and that's the most important thing with this deck is a lot of people have this incorrect notion that the deck is inconsistent and that it's all accelerants and like threats and it's just kind of at odds with each other. The reason you run all those accelerants is because you expect people to kill them.
Right.
But the most important thing to have in the later game is ways to use your mana. So by playing stuff like Mistcutter on the board and these X spells in the main deck, where almost every turn I'm completely tapped out, passing to my opponent, and that's usually when the deck's doing the most powerful things.
Right. In a world of Freakus Cure, a plethora of 2 mana removal spells, Hero's Downfall,
Shock out of the burn deck,
stuff like that. To be able to have 3 or 4 of those mana dudes, so they run out of removal.
Absolutely.
It's pretty good. Now, your spice from the sideboard here, 2 copies of Stain the Mind.
It's the stains.
The stains, you say.
Yes.
M15, Convoke card.
Yep.
Where are you bringing this in?
Supreme Verdict. I have a personal vendetta against the card, and when we were testing the blue-white, the Esper, or whatever, the Verdict matchups, we realized that if you just stained on turns 3 or 4, naming their Verdict, pull that out of their deck, they can't keep up with you. You're putting threats on the table much faster than they are. You then have Golgari Charm if they happen to have the Planar Cleansing version. And it's pretty easy to play around their detention spheres. You just don't run out double Eidolon. You can't run out double Polukranos, so you're safe there. It felt really, really strong. And also, like let's say you know that your opponent doesn't have the Verdict and you're going to kill him the next turn, you can always just name Rev or Elspeth. It's not what you're supposed to do. Name Supreme Verdict every time.
Yeah, a lot of people like these type of effects to grab the Sphinx's Rev out of those decks. But in this deck, you don't really need to worry about that because you're just doing way bigger things than a Sphinx's Revelation.
Absolutely.
And as you said, playing around Planar Cleansing and stuff, this card, you get to look through their deck. So you can just see if they're on that plan or not.
Absolutely.
Pretty powerful.
I've actually named Azorius Charm as my second most named card, just to stop them from interacting with my Nyleas and Polukranos in the attack step. The last card that's in here, which I'm somewhat embarrassed because I proceeded to bash this card for weeks on end.
Bow of Nylea, huh?
Yeah. So the bow was kind of a last-minute change. We decided that we wanted the Nylea's Disciple main deck. We didn't want to play 4 copies total in the deck. Bow is a really good card against the burn deck, but we also realized that in the mono blue matchup, not only does Bow sometimes shoot their creatures, but if you get Bow Nylea down, you invalidate most of their ability to interact in the combat step.
Wow,
And you actually have the ability to race them by putting more, threats on the board. So it makes it a pretty, also obviously the Polukranos Bow interactions neat.
Yeah, Trample, Death Touch, pretty good combo.
Real quick.
And of course you have a couple more Nylea's Disciples in the board, as you said. And then 2 of Setessan Tactics, which I think is probably one of the most underrated cards in Standard right now.
100%. It's there for the mirror. As in round 1 on camera, game 3, I tactics all his accelerants, and he had an active Garuk, and I still beat him through that. Setessan Tactics is also fine. Randomly, when your opponents attempt to kill your creatures with damage, sometimes Tactics lets you work around that, or it's Drown in Sorrow tech as well.
Yeah, in a pinch, just punch your dudes.
Yeah, you really aren't bringing it in for that matchup, but it's very versatile, and I like it quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, the deck looks sweet. You're off to a 2-0 start.
Yes.
So, what are you looking to try to fade in this room today with this deck?
I would really just like to, I think I want to play the Verdict decks, but at the same time, I don't. I'm prepared for it, but it's kind of a love-hate thing. I would have to say high-level mono black players I still don't want to play against. That deck is very powerful right now. A lot of decisions they can make. They have access to a ton of Bio Blights. So that would be the number 1 deck that I want to avoid in the hands of really good pilots. I would love to play against any amount of creature decks. Mono Blue's the one I'm scared of because Thos is so efficient, but all the other creature decks, they play 1 creature, I play 4. Not really a fair equation.
All right, well, you're 2-0. You got 8 rounds left in the Standard Open here, so I wish you the best of luck. Thanks for sitting down on the sideboard.
No problem.
Stay tuned all weekend long to the sideboard and StarCityGames.com for all the information here in Kansas City.